For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePointset. Yeah, man. Tyree, thank you for being on the channel today. How are you doing?
Of course, my guy. It's good to be here, man. It's good to see you. It's been a while. Feels like it was like yesterday that we were on the Emeralds writing columns and pissing off all the white people.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously though, like one of the people I really like, I just like brag to people about when they talk about, days at the Emerald, just because like, first black editor at the Emerald, history maker. And like one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is just because like it's funny to think about how many of us just from that time have actually like gone on to, like traditional journalism, because it's not
Fam,
not a
off the top of my head, I feel like 2 or 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more, but most of the people I know have gotten into advertising or PR or communications for like the city or something like that. Yeah, which is like surprising because when you're working on like the college newspaper, it's such a like idealistic, newsy place, and you feel like everyone's destined to be in the newsroom because they're in there, and like your whole life. I mean, like that came before school for me when I was working on a newspaper. So like that was like everything for me, and it was everything for like everybody on the paper as far as I knew. And so it's like such a surprise to see like, oh, then the real world kicks in and people realize, oh, I got to pay bills, or oh, being in a newsroom is kind of a tough place as a young person or as a young person of color. And I've got to figure out an alternative because I got $50,000 of debt over my head. And there's just a lot of reality circumstances that don't really bode well with the realities of journalism, of working in journalism.
Right. Like, I mean, you were, I would say like you were, yeah, the editor, then going on like
Right.
doing Super Bowl commercials. So it's hard to be like, oh, you made the wrong decision. But with that in mind, like if there was a way to like for you to have actually like been in, just like well, not standard, but like traditional news, would that have been the way you would have gone if you had the opportunity?
I think something that was really interesting coming out of college. So when you're in, I don't know if this is a everything like everywhere thing, but at the University of Oregon, it was very much like if you're a journalism student, you're like the moral compass of everything. And then the advertising kids and the PR kids, according to the journalism students, are like the soul sucking scum of the earth who are corporatists, blah, 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 like all these like things, it's like if you go to those sides, it's like going to the dark side. And so there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. And like I had felt bad that my trajectory wasn't gonna allow me to go into the newsroom because I wasn't willing to make those compromises or sacrifices. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall when I thought about like where newsrooms are going and what it's like to be young in newspapers and all the recent grads that I knew and what they were doing. Like there's a lot of dues to be paid, and rightfully so, because journalism is such an important thing, and the only way to get better at it is to constantly do it. And you're dealing with neighborhoods and communities, and there's so much to learn. And I knew I had a ton to learn as a journalist and as a writer, and I think everybody does. But like I had always come up as like a column writer, and so I wanted to write opinion pieces. Like I could do the other stuff, but that was more like, okay, I can technically do that, but let me go drop these bars. Like let me say something that's on my mind. And that's how I always saw journalism for me, was like a place for me to tell stories with some perspective, like my own perspective in there, and embracing that. But I knew it was going to take me 5, 10, 15, 20 years before I got the trust to do things in a way that I did when I was at a college newspaper. So I didn't know if I would have the passion to really stick with it, knowing that it wasn't what I was wanting to do. And I was terrified to be like 15 years down the road, at this crosswalk where this is the only thing that like I can do. Um, but it was still a lot of guilt because the virtues of journalism. It's like it's extremely important. You're a representative for the people. You push back against institutional forces that seek to oppress us. You especially as a Black person, you have the opportunity to like look at these white male led organizations that tell us what's true and what's not. And I have the chance to be like an eye for that and really watch out for the community in a way that is difficult. It's difficult to really have. And, you know, not being able to do that and having to use those skills in advertising to sell headphones and shoes and a bunch of other like stuff that at the end of the day is just stuff, and it's not stuff that's going to change the world. um you feel bad and you're like, man, I wish that I could use my capabilities for the better. But I think the turning point for me was, well, first of all, once all my friends all got out of journalism too, I was like, okay, well then it just wasn't me, and I was just kind of ahead of the curve on what's next. But I think, what was I gonna say? I think the second thing that validated it, or not necessarily validated for it, but that made me feel a little bit better, is just like, yo, like life is there. Like I graduated, I came from unlikely circumstances, and I've got 30,000 over my head, and those are things I got to figure out. Um, and once I realized that, like, all right, you don't have to work in a newspaper, and you don't have to, write AP style to be a truth teller and to be a truth seeker in the world. And that's not the only way you can use those talents for good. On like a advertising example, we when my partner Kwaku and I did the Hear What You Want campaign, it was very much rooted in like solving a brand problem and communicating a purpose, but there was a larger conversation that we were able to tap into and create, just because we had those cultural insights, and we had both come from that journalism school background where we could understand communication, understand what's going on, and translate that into culture. And I think that was very important, and that was something that I would not have been able to do, and we would not have been able to do if we didn't have our journalism school backgrounds. And then also, I think coming out of the journalism program, all those skills, I use them every single day. There's not a day I'm not trying to figure out how to tell a truth, or how to communicate to a larger audience, or how to express my opinion, or how to, like how to interview somebody. All those skills are things that you can use everywhere. And we had a class called Gateway. And I tell this to people all the time, and I think it's funny. And when Gateway first dropped, and we used to have one before that was called Info Hell. That was like,
that's what I had.
That's what you
Info
had.
Hell.
So you had it was like 100-page research paper.
Yep.
And I was honestly like, yo, I'm not sure if I'm about to do this major for the 100-page research paper. But like the year I got there, they were like, yo, we got this thing called Gateway. And it was like giving you a crash course of all these different, like you would design a paper, you would do a photo series, you would do a video, you would write an article. And it was like a super quick crash course on everything. And at the time, I was like, yo, what the fuck is all this? I'm a writer. Like, don't put me in front of a camera. Don't have me do all this. Don't make me edit. What? I'm a writer. I'm going to write columns. I don't need to take pictures for my own columns. And it seemed stupid at the time, especially because the like new media stuff was pretty cutting edge at that time, where like, oh, you mean we make videos, and like, you mean I don't just sit behind this desk? Weird. But when I like got out of school, all of a sudden, in advertising, you might have to sit in an edit bay and have feedback on color and give notes on sound. And you might write a headline. Like there's so many things that you have to do and touch. I had felt like, oh, well, Gateway kind of like at least gave me enough knowledge to talk about those things. So I was tremendously grateful for that. I wish maybe it's different now, but in my time, I think my mindset at that time was the mindset of like, all right, I'm gonna get through this gateway thing, whatever, and then I'm just gonna go back to writing. I wish we understood just how valuable those journalism skills are and how you have the right not to be beholden to like a traditional job or, to go into journalism, and you don't have to feel um guilty about that. Like, you have a life, you have things that you need to do, and I think the obligation for you just becomes, what can I do in my own time, or how do I use those skills in my career to still stimulate those discussions, and be a change maker, like I learned in my program. And change, like I said, change makers can happen in any industry. They don't have to just write columns in newspapers. Like, I started taking photos in my own time, and doing little mini series, documenting the Venice basketball community, and trying to figure out how to talk about public transportation in Los Angeles. So like, that truth seeker and that journalism background is like still very embedded in what I'm trying to do in my own personal style and my own life projects. But it's definitely difficult to navigate the guilt of not doing that thing that you always thought you would do.
Yeah, no, I hear that, but I like what you're talking about with like skills, because
Mm-hmm.
you know we're all kind of like in this space where, just like the industry, like I said, is really topsy turvy. In one way, it's frightening, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as far as just like lack of media literacy and the
Mm-hmm.
effects on society. But the other part is, it is exciting, like you said, because you don't necessarily need to be in a traditional newspaper or anchor format to get information to people. And in fact, there's probably as much distrust as ever of
Yeah,
a lot of that. And
completely.
you know a lot of it's earned, if we're being real about it.
I mean, if
But
you look at the coverage of the pullout of Afghanistan, that's all you need to look at to be like, oh, so there's propaganda. like
right.
like there's a whole lot of propaganda in the media. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty nuts. It's like, I was watching something and they were talking about how, like, for the past 5, 6, 8 years, whatever, like, you barely ever know that we were even in Afghanistan and all the atrocities that were happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we actually decide, okay, let's get out of here, all of a sudden we want to talk about all the atrocities that are happening, as if there weren't bombings and everything that were happening,
Man,
all the time. You know what I'm
remember,
saying?
like when we were in school, I remember like when I was writing those columns, trying to talk about like Obama just exponentially expanding the drone program. And
Yeah.
back then they had a policy where I forget what the spokesperson's name was. Like, was it Jay Carney or was it someone before that?
Mm.
Anyways, like they had an official policy to like not acknowledge that, in the press conferences. So you are getting, if you're following the news on anything outside of like CNN and MSNBC and Fox, whatever back then, like you're hearing about, oh, they bombed this village and killed this many families, this many children. But then they go on CNN, and I'm arguing with real people about, this
Mm-hmm.
drone program exists, and people are like, well, but the spokesperson said it didn't. So are you sure? Would Obama really do that? And like, what?
I mean,
Yeah.
president's going president.
Right, right. But that kind of comes back to, we talk about like what are the effects when, like who gets to, like who is in these positions. Like I got into things late, but I was in a traditional newsroom, but that
Yeah.
lasted for like 2 years,
Yeah.
and then it made the fact that it made more sense for me to freelance than be a reporter is like, I guess it's a little bit more understandable in 2021 than 2014.
Right.
That's
Right. Right.
still that's wild economically. Because like freelancing isn't, it is not a gold mine. It is not, like,
Certainly not when you're early in your career, like later on in your career for sure, because you've
yeah,
had such a long line of work and you have all your contacts and things like that. But 2 years into your industry to go freelance, like, whoa.
yeah, no, like so the people who generally like, I mean, we talk about like these personalities, whether it be on like CNN, like an Anderson Cooper, formerly on
Mm-mm.
ESPN, Rachel Nichols. We're not going.
Here
There's
we
some other
go.
stuff about that. No. But these people like they come from these like really wealthy families. Was it Rachel Nichols is what like Dan Sawyer's niece?
Yeah.
Anderson Cooper's
Married into her family or something like that. Well,
yeah.
I mean,
Tucker
there's a
Carlson is like the Swanson heir. Like
perfect.
these are the people who are at
Yeah.
the head of distributing news to people.
I mean, we seen it firsthand. There's no question why. I mean, again, when I graduated from school, I had about $30,000 in debt. There were definitely newsroom opportunities out there for me for sure. But it was like I owe a lot of money and I can't afford to do unpaid internships, and I can't, like there's a huge support system that people from certain communities have, white people who are doing well, who don't have student debt, like who can your parents can help you with your bills or whatever, or maybe you can move to a certain area and feel safe. Like, I don't feel comfortable like moving to, I don't even know where you would move, but like those Boonesville areas where a lot of entry level journalism jobs are, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable moving there as a Black person trying to cover these communities, you know?
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of uh, little struggles and that make it so certain people can work these jobs and certain people can't. And so then by the time you get to the highest level, the people who are able to make it there and who had that leg up and who had the support system are all going to be from a certain place and a certain socioeconomic class, and they're going to have a certain perspective. There's not going to be a whole lot of them who came from single parent households, had parents, teen mothers, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's always the exceptions that prove the point, but by and large, it's like, upper middle class, you know, well-educated parents and everything like that, which of course is like cool, but we're supposed to be representing all the people. So a lot of things can slip through the cracks because of that. Like if you ever wonder why coverage of our communities and coverage of everything is so messed up, I mean, look who's covering it.
Right. Right. I
No
mean,
one holds them accountable to our opinion.
exactly. And it's a yeah, it's just you get the perspective, you get like this lack of perspective, you get, much more, I guess, like willingness not to, challenge things in the newsroom, not to, go that extra length just because like it's all protecting comfort. It's all the same people. But it does
Absolutely.
also I think that's part of the reason why it's so topsy turvy in this time is just because like, there's a balance there where like, we can talk about, oh, Trump went out here and sowed all this distrust in the media, but honestly, he just like played on something that was already there
Mhm.
because we get this lack of balance in coverage. And yeah, like people do feel that whether, it's stated or not, whether someone puts a news story out on it or not.
Yeah.
But, now we're in this place where, disinformation is huge, where,
Yeah.
Alex Joneses of the world are running wild and they're as successful as ever based on
Man,
a lot of that distrust. And what do you do now that we're kind of like, you know, what was it that Pandora's box, whatever is open?
it's I've been really struggling with navigating all this because it's like there's so many ways that this has happened. It's like, all right, we have a mainstream media that like we can't trust, like by and large. Like obviously, like they're necessary, and like sometimes you start there and you go other places to like see what's not real or what is real or whatever. But then what's happened with that as well is you get a lot of these offshoots. You'll get your Alex Joneses and you'll get your more credible alternative medias, but now there's just so much information out there. And the human mind loves what's it call it? Confirmation bias. So if I already believe something, or if I'm already skewed towards something, and someone gives me that and they look credible, or they look impassioned, or they do or rhetorically engaging for me, all of a sudden that becomes my truth. And you can find your truth online, whatever you want your truth to be. If you want to believe the White House is filled with lizard people, you can find that truth. If you want the world to be flat, if you want the moon landing to be a fraud, you can find that truth. So in a world where the mainstream media doesn't encourage us to be media savvy, and society doesn't really encourage us to be media savvy, then you get all these different forces coming to people. And most of us aren't focused, and they don't have 4 or 5 years of journalism training to understand, all these different things. So whatever you want, you kind of go to combine that with, Facebook and algorithms, curating things to your liking. All of a sudden, your bubble is all that you see. You don't even see outside forces. How many of us actively go look for things that we don't agree with? Like, it just doesn't happen that much anymore. So yeah, I don't know how to manage it, because obviously we need alternative media. Like, that's the most important thing that we can have, because we cannot have these corporate establishment people being the only people who distribute this information. Because again, look at how they're trying to use women's rights to enable us staying in Afghanistan, because what about the women? Like,
Yeah, but we're still selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Like,
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much propaganda, and we can't depend on any one institution for that. The news, the truth, whatever. It's too big, and you know, you just have to be a well-rounded consumer of media. But most of us can't be that, and most of us
right.
can be swayed. And the vaccine conversation is so tough because of that as well. And also, sorry if I'm rambling and ranting, I'm just spitting it all out. But the way that we talk to each other because of social, like, we kind of like speak in hot comments for likes, instead of really trying to actually engage and empathize with each other's experience. Like, I'm a Black man and I got vaccinated. And I thought it was my civic duty and it was the right thing for me to do, and, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd have to be a damn fool if I couldn't empathize and understand the mistrust of the government and the long legacy of Black people being used as guinea pigs for experiments. You know what I'm saying? For medical experiments. So like, I understand the opposition on a lot of things as much as I can. And I think we don't engage in dialogues with empathy. We just don't. And I'm guilty of that as well. We just don't. And all of that creates this war zone that we kind of have in the media right now, where everyone's just holding on to their truth and they're not accepting anything that challenges it, even if it is the more likely scenario.
Right. And I just kind of like close it out by saying, like, that's kind of, again, what makes this, like I said earlier, a scary time, but also kind of like an exciting time in terms of the opportunities. Like, I do think we have an idea, at least a lot of us, as far as like what, like, the target we're shooting for. Like, clearly we need to find a way to like increase media literacy in a way that does not require people to go to school for 4 or 5 years to get it. Like, we need to make this accessible. We need to make this, whether it's putting it in curriculum, whether it's building more, even just more content that actually explores these things and talks about these questions. Literally having the discussion we're having about why are certain people reporting the news and why are a lot of people not? Why are, getting that information to people? And I think, like, I can't tell you how many people, whenever we're asked or whenever we put, some poll out asking people, so where do you get your news? What is your source? How many times people are like Twitter? And, again, the person who went to, journalism school and me is just like, uh, can you
Right.
elaborate? Please tell me it's not just, I just post
Just
it from
a
my timeline.
headline. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But also kind of is. But, at the same time, like we talked about earlier, there are so many different opportunities, whether it is through social media, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through ad campaigns, whether it's through all types of creative means to get information out there, to like have these conversations, to explore things. And people, because there's so much distrust in traditional media, is also a great time just to like, throw that out there for people to like latch onto. It doesn't mean, I think it gets overplayed by, people who've kind of like been alternative media and successful for like 10 years and like, we're the future. And it's like, yes, you are, but you're also selling to like a bunch of other people who, have not had like a YouTube deal for 15 years
Yeah.
that that, they're going to challenge the New York Times when it's just like, probably not,
No.
So, that said though, like, I'm seeing myself with just like, oh, people are kind of like interested in, if I put this on Patreon or if I put this on this other
Mhm.
platform and, I figure out a way to market it. And even then you gotta, at least what I've found is you have to still, you still gotta do some stuff that's kind of like a little bit clickbaity. Like I know I look at
Yeah.
my stats like anyone else. And I'm trying to more like find points in my interviews where it's like, okay, where can I just inject a little bit of Charlemagne? Like, I feel bad saying that, but it's real. Like, he's got,
I mean, media, I mean, it's still, you still have an audience, you still need to resonate with your audience, and you still need to, it's a business for you. You need to be able to provide a living for yourself. So um I think as long as you're beholden to the truth and the integrity that you believe in, and that's a big if, because, there's a lot of ways to cross that line. But as long as you're beholden to that, I mean, more power to you, bro. Like, it's in everybody's interest that we get to hear what you have to say, bro. So whatever you got to do, man, for real.
I appreciate that. So, yeah, Tyree, thank you again for taking the time. Where can people find you and see more of your work?
Oh man. So I mean, I'm all over the place right now. I think the biggest thing that I've been working on right now is really trying to get my photography stuff going. Trying to make that happen. I came up as a writer, and recently made a transition to my photography career. So trying to build all that up.
Again, shout out to Gateway.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out to Gateway for all that. You never know, in a few years I might be an editor. Who knows? But no, it's been cool, man. I think the photography stuff's probably the main thing. You can check out my Instagram, which is in these eyes. I'm sure you'll drop a link to people or something like that.
Yep,
But yeah, that's probably the main place you can check out my work.
for sure. Well, yeah, Tyree Harris, thank you again. And, best of luck in this crazy media environment.
Hey man, right back at you, bro. Proud to see you still doing the good work, man, for real.
I'm trying. Thank you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the latest videos. Thank you.